Hello, book enthusiasts, and welcome to Listen with Best Audiobooks. All our audiobooks are originally written, produced, and narrated by us. We don't reuse or repurpose third-party content. Every script, voice, and edit is made exclusively for this channel. Our goal is to deliver authentic, educational, and inspiring audiobooks that you can truly enjoy. Now, sit back, relax, and let's begin today's audiobook.
They don't speak like everyone else because they don't think like everyone else. The top 1% know something that the rest don't. Your voice is your power. Before they see your credentials, before they look at your results, they listen. The way you speak shapes the way the world treats you. It's not just about sounding smart. It's about sounding certain, and in a world full of noise, certainty is rare. In this audiobook, I'm going to show you how to speak like the elite, with clarity, presence, and quiet authority. This is not a guide to fake confidence. This is how to become so sure of yourself that you don't need to speak louder. People will simply lean in. If you're serious about leveling up how you speak, think, and carry yourself, hit subscribe because this journey will change how the world listens to you forever. Chapter 1. The Voice of Power. There's something different about the way they walk into a room, the way they look at you, the way they speak. The 1% don't ask for attention. They command it. And that command doesn't come from arrogance or noise. It comes from a kind of silence, a steady presence that says, "I belong here." Long before they open their mouth, they've already made an impression. But when they do speak, you listen, not because you have to, but because every word carries weight. This is the voice of power. The truth is, most people speak to fill silence, but the elite speak to shape silence. They understand something most never learn. Your words are not just words. They are tools, weapons, bridges, shields. Every sentence you say either elevates you or cheapens you. The elite don't waste language. They use it to carve out influence. They know the right moment to pause, the right time to speak slower, the exact tone that commands attention without ever sounding desperate. They've trained their voice like a sculptor trains his hands until every sentence becomes a masterpiece. If you want to speak like the elite, you must first understand what your voice truly is. It's not just the sound coming out of your mouth. Your voice is the energy behind your words. It's the internal belief, the self-respect, the emotional control, and the mental clarity that bleeds through your tone. Speaking like the 1% isn't about copying how someone else talks. It's about rewiring how you think. Because when your inner world changes, your voice follows. And that's where we begin. Most people never develop their voice because they never develop their identity. They talk fast to sound smart. They raise their voice to sound confident. But it's all noise with no power underneath. Power doesn't shout. It doesn't race. It doesn't over-explain. It doesn't beg for agreement. It just is. That's why the elite can say fewer words and make a stronger impact. They don't need filler. Their very presence speaks before their mouth does. But don't be mistaken. This is not something they were born with. This is trained. This is built. And it starts with learning to speak to yourself differently before you ever open your mouth to others. Because here's the truth. If you don't respect your own words, no one else will. You need to become a person who thinks before they speak, not because you're scared, but because you understand that your voice is your signature. Every word you say becomes part of how people remember you. If your speech is cluttered, unclear, and reactive, they will remember you as insecure. But if your voice is steady, direct, and measured, they will remember you as someone who is in control. The 1% live by a simple rule. Speak less, mean more. They aren't in a hurry to prove themselves. And that's exactly why they're so convincing. The world is full of people who talk too much and say nothing. But when someone walks into the room and speaks slowly, clearly, with intention, it changes everything. People stop. They notice because it's rare. And what's rare becomes valuable. But you don't get there by faking it. You don't get there by memorizing scripts or copying influencers. You get there by learning the art of internal power. You get there by becoming someone who doesn't need to speak, but chooses to. wisely. That's where presence comes from. Presence is built in silence, in restraint, in deep self-awareness. And when you have presence, your voice becomes a tool of leadership. Let's talk about tone. The tone of your voice reveals everything. You can say the same sentence in two different tones and get two completely different reactions. The elite understand how to control tone like an instrument. They aren't robotic. They aren't dramatic. They're precise. They can soften their voice when they want connection. They can firm it when they want clarity. They know how to raise it by 1 degree, not 10, to signal urgency without panic. It's a controlled kind of intensity that comes from practice, not performance. And then there's pacing. Pacing is the rhythm of your message. Speak too fast and you sound nervous. Speak too slow and you risk losing the room. But when you master pacing, when you know when to pause, when to let a sentence hang in the air for just 1 extra beat, people lean in. Silence becomes your ally. Every pause becomes a moment of power. Great speakers don't fill every second. They shape time. And now let's talk about language. You must clean up your language, not just in terms of profanity, but in terms of excess. Cut the filler. Cut the like, the you know. These are words of uncertainty. The elite don't lean on filler because they trust their words. They trust their ideas. And they trust that silence is not their enemy. When you stop fearing silence, your words gain strength. Here's what happens when you begin to refine your voice. People begin to mirror you. They slow down. They listen. They speak more carefully around you. Because power is contagious. And soon, you'll notice something strange. You're not just being heard more, you're being respected more. Doors open, people follow, not because you forced them, but because you've become someone who speaks with clarity and carries weight. That's the shift. That's the goal. But remember, this is not about being loud. It's about being grounded. It's not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. You don't have to speak like a politician. You have to speak like someone who knows who they are. And that takes work. That takes self-awareness, consistency, and practice. Not just with your mouth, but with your mind. You must become someone who listens better, because the elite don't just talk well. They listen sharply. They read the room. They adapt without losing control. And that comes from emotional intelligence, not just communication skills. So as you begin this journey, know this. You are training your voice not just to sound better, but to become more powerful, more persuasive, and more precise. You're developing a voice that creates trust, a voice that moves people, a voice that reflects the elite version of you. This is chapter 1. This is where your transformation begins. When you master your voice, you don't just speak like the elite, you become one. Chapter 2. Presence is louder than words. Before a single word leaves your mouth, you've already spoken, not through your lips, but through your energy, your stillness, your posture, your presence. The elite understand this truth better than anyone. Words are secondary. Presence speaks first. And presence doesn't come from how tall you are, how expensive your clothes are, or how loud your voice is. It comes from something deeper, a calm confidence that fills the room before you even introduce yourself. You can walk into a meeting, a negotiation, a room full of strangers, and without saying a single word, shift the atmosphere. But that only happens when your internal world is solid. Presence begins with self-trust. Most people walk into rooms trying to prove they belong. The elite walk in knowing they do. That's the difference. They don't shrink. They don't puff up. They settle in. They don't need to force their place at the table. Their presence earns it. It's a quiet strength, not loud, not showy, but undeniable. So how do you build presence? It starts with stillness. Stillness is the foundation of presence. The average person fidgets, overreacts, rushes their movements. The elite are composed. Their movements are minimal, intentional. Their gestures are not erratic. They let silence breathe. They let others speak. They are not in a hurry to fill the air. Why? Because they understand this truth. The one who can stay still under pressure controls the room. When you are calm while others are anxious, people notice. When you speak slowly while others ramble, people listen. When you carry yourself like time is on your side, you automatically gain influence. Because calm is power, and in a frantic world, calm is rare. Presence also comes from focus. Wherever you are, be all there. No split attention, no checking your phone, no scanning the room for someone more important. The elite give people full attention, and that attention becomes a mirror. It makes others feel seen, and when people feel seen, they respect you. But focus also means control over your emotional state. The elite do not react emotionally in the moment. They respond deliberately. That's presence. Presence is emotional discipline. It's the ability to stay centered even when things feel off. It's the ability to look someone in the eye with a soft strength. Not intimidation, but certainty. And then there's posture. The body tells a story before your mouth ever gets involved. Shoulders relaxed, spine tall, chin neutral, eyes clear. No need to dominate. Just stand like someone who is not apologizing for existing. Walk like someone who belongs everywhere they go. Sit like someone who doesn't need to be the loudest, because their presence says enough. And it's not about fake body language. The elite don't memorize gestures. They embody self-respect. When you respect yourself, it shows in your walk, your handshake, your stillness. You don't need to shout. Your body already told the room who you are. Presence also requires mastery over your breathing. Shallow, fast breathing communicates stress. Deep, even breathing communicates control. Before the elite walk into a room, they're not rehearsing what to say. They're calming their breath because they know this. Your breathing controls your voice, your emotions, your energy. Breathe well and you speak well. Breathe shallow and you rush your message. It's all connected. And that's why presence isn't something you do. It's something you become. Presence also means being comfortable with yourself. No need to perform. No need to seek approval. No need to mold yourself to fit the room. When you are deeply comfortable with your identity, you no longer need validation. You stop people-pleasing. And in doing so, you become magnetic. Because confidence isn't loud, it's calm, and calm confidence draws people in. Now let's talk about time. The elite do not rush. Their pace is unhurried. They are not slaves to the clock. Even when they are on a schedule, they move with intention. They speak in rhythm. They don't rush decisions. They don't talk over people. Why? Because they know that control over time is a form of dominance, when you control your time, you control your energy. And when you control your energy, you control the room. Presence is also built through preparation. The elite are not winging it. They've prepared their mind. They've reviewed the facts. They've thought through the outcome. That preparation shows up in their calmness. They don't look surprised. They don't stumble. They respond with quiet certainty. Even when caught off guard, they buy time, a pause, a breath, a look. That's all it takes. And it's not just about formal meetings. Presence shows up in casual moments too. At dinner, in conversation, in interviews, in conflict. The way you hold yourself in small moments is a reflection of how deeply you've trained. Because presence is a lifestyle, not a trick. Let's go even deeper. True presence means letting go of the need to be liked. The elite don't chase approval. They're not rude. They're not dismissive, but they don't compromise their core for applause. They stand where they are, and they let people come to them. This is one of the rarest qualities, and one of the most powerful, because when you don't need anything from the room gives you everything. Now here's the shift. You don't build presence overnight. You build it moment by moment. Every time you choose calm over chaos. Every time you take a deep breath instead of reacting. Every time you say less and mean more. Every time you walk into a room with self-trust instead of insecurity, you build presence. And over time, that presence becomes who you are. Not something you try to do, but something people feel the moment they meet you. So if you want to speak like the elite, don't just focus on words. Focus on presence. Speak with your silence. Speak with your stillness. Speak with the way you carry yourself. Because long before you say anything powerful, your presence already told the truth. And when your presence speaks louder than your words, you won't need to talk much. You'll already have the room. Chapter 3. The secret power of pausing. The pause. So simple, so quiet, yet so powerful. In a world where everyone races to speak, those who can pause, who can hold a moment, command silence, and let words settle, carry a different kind of weight. The elite understand this truth better than anyone. It's not just what you say that matters. It's when you don't say anything at all. A pause is more than empty space. It's control, it's precision, it's presence. Most people fear silence. They feel the need to fill every second with sound. But the elite know that silence is not awkward. Silence is active. It gives space for the listener to process. It lets emotions settle. It builds tension. It shows confidence. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that you're not desperate for attention. In the hands of someone who has mastered their voice, a pause becomes a statement. Let's look at what a pause really does. First, a pause creates emphasis. When you pause before a word or after a sentence, you draw attention to what just happened or what's about to happen. It's like bolding or underlining your speech. You're telling the room, this matters, and the room listens because silence draws focus. Second, a pause gives your message time to land. Your words are like stones dropped into water. Without a pause, the ripples don't get a chance to form. But when you pause, you let the listener feel the impact. You give your message room to breathe. And breathing room is what makes words memorable. Third, a pause signals composure. In heated discussions, when others rush to respond, your pause becomes power. It shows you're not reactive. You're not emotional. You're calculating. You're calm. And in negotiation or conflict, calm equals control. Now consider this. When someone is nervous, they speak fast. They ramble. They interrupt. But someone who is confident speaks slowly. They don't rush to fill gaps. They wait. They let the silence do some of the speaking. That's what makes them magnetic. In fact, some of the most powerful speakers in history use the pause as their secret weapon. They would deliver a powerful idea, then let silence hang. Just a few seconds. Long enough for the audience to absorb. Long enough to create anticipation. Long enough to stir emotion. And that's the key. The pause creates emotional gravity. Because when you pause, the listener leans in. Their mind becomes alert. They sense something important is happening, or about to. You draw them in without raising your voice, without speeding up, just with presence and timing. But here's the real mastery. Pausing without losing momentum. You're not pausing because you forgot what to say. You're pausing because you meant to. That's the difference. The elite know how to control the rhythm. They guide the flow of a conversation like a conductor leads music. Up, down, stop, breathe, begin again. They make you wait, not to stall, but to pull you in. And there's another level. Pausing can also become a test. When you pause in conversation and remain still, watch how others react. Some will rush to fill the space. Others will feel uncomfortable. But you stay composed. That's presence. That's poise. That's how you make people realize you're not here to prove anything. You're here to lead. Now let's look at internal impact. The pause isn't just for your audience, it's for you too. When you learn to pause before you speak, you give yourself the power to choose your words. You break the habit of reacting impulsively. You respond with intention. That's the beginning of mastery. In moments of tension, when someone insults you, challenges you, misinterprets you, your ability to pause becomes a shield. It stops you from saying things you'll regret. It gives you the edge. Because the person who pauses first leads the moment. And that pause doesn't have to be long. It can be a breath, a heartbeat, just enough to break the cycle, just enough to regain control. And over time, this becomes second nature. You become someone who doesn't just speak. You thinks aloud with elegance and power. There's something deeply attractive about a person who can hold space, who isn't afraid of a little silence, who trusts that their words are strong enough to stand alone, without rushing, without panic. The elite don't speak for applause. They speak for clarity, and silence is part of that clarity. Let's bring it into the real world. In a presentation, a pause before your key point builds suspense. In an interview, a pause after a question shows depth. In a disagreement, a pause before your rebuttal shows confidence. In everyday conversation, a pause helps you listen better, not just hear. And in storytelling, the pause is golden. A well-placed pause between phrases or after an emotional sentence allows your listener to feel. It invites them in. It makes the story more human, more engaging, more real. So now ask yourself, can you sit with silence? Can you pause in the middle of a sentence and still hold attention? Can you let others talk without jumping in? Because the ones who can always stand out. There's an elegance to restraint, a discipline in the pause, a power that doesn't come from volume, but from control. When you learn to pause with intention, your voice becomes unforgettable. Not because you said more, but because you said it better. And that is how the 1% speak. Chapter 4. The Language of Certainty. Certainty is magnetic. It draws people in. It calms the nervous. It silences the doubters. And those who speak with certainty are not just heard. They are trusted, believed, followed. When the elite speak, they don't beg for your attention. They don't ask for permission. They speak as if what they're saying already matters. Because to them, it does. Their words come from conviction, not convenience. And that conviction, that language of certainty, makes all the difference. The average person speaks in loops, doubts, disclaimers. They say, I think, maybe, I guess, probably. They leave their message full of escape routes. Why? Because they don't want to be wrong. They'd rather sound soft than risk being bold. But the elite understand something simple. If you don't sound sure of yourself, no one else will be either. The language of certainty starts by cleaning up your speech. Eliminate hesitation, not just from your tone, but from your vocabulary. Speak in declarations, not suggestions. Say, this is what I believe. Not, I could be wrong, but say, here's what works. Not, I think this might help. You're not lying. You're not pretending to know what you don't. You're owning what you do know, with confidence, not apology. Certainty doesn't mean arrogance. It means clarity. And clarity is rare. Most people confuse being loud with being confident. But real certainty isn't loud. It's clean. It's focused. It's sharp. The elite don't ramble. They don't over-explain. They say what they mean and they stop. Because they trust that their message doesn't need decoration. It just needs delivery. And when they do speak, they do it with presence, with calm, with precision. Their message is clear because their mind is clear. That's the real secret. Certainty in speech comes from certainty in thought. If your thoughts are chaotic, your voice will be too. If your beliefs are shallow, your tone will waver. But when you've done the inner work, when your beliefs are rooted in experience, reflection, and discipline, your voice becomes unshakable. This is what the elite practice daily. They don't just learn how to speak, they learn how to think. They question their own opinions until they find truth. They refine their beliefs. They seek depth. So when they speak, they're not pulling from surface-level noise. They're speaking from the core, and people feel that. You've felt it too. You've been in conversations where someone said something simple, but it carried weight. Why? Because they believed it fully. They didn't dress it up. They didn't hedge. They just said it. And that certainty made you stop and consider. Now think about the opposite. When someone keeps changing their tone, backpedaling, adding disclaimers, it doesn't matter how smart they are. If they don't sound sure, you don't trust them. Their message gets lost in their uncertainty. That's why the language of certainty is so important, not just in leadership, but in every part of life. In relationships, certainty builds safety. In sales, certainty builds trust. In leadership, certainty builds direction. In self-talk, certainty builds belief. And it's not something you're born with. It's something you train. Let's go deeper. Certainty also shows up in body language. When your words say yes, but your body says maybe, people notice. If your voice says I'm confident, but your eyes shift, your shoulders sag, or your hands fidget, your message loses power. The elite align their voice with their body, their tone with their posture, their message with their energy. That alignment is where certainty lives. It's not about perfection, it's about congruence. When everything you are agrees with everything you're saying, that's when people believe you. It's also about rhythm. The elite don't rush. They don't apologize for taking space. They speak slowly enough to be heard, but not so slow that they sound unsure. Their pacing shows that they're not afraid of silence and not in a hurry to escape their own words. They believe in their message, so they sit in it, let it echo, let it land. And there's one more layer to this. Certainty isn't about never being wrong. The elite aren't always right. They're just always rooted. That means when they're wrong, they don't collapse. They correct with strength. They adapt without insecurity because their certainty isn't based on ego. It's Bernstein or Ensei, Ising. It's based on purpose. They speak like their words are part of something bigger than themselves. And that's what makes it powerful. They're not performing, they're transmitting. They're not trying to sound smart. They're trying to serve something meaningful. And that depth gives them gravity. So how do you build this in your own voice? You start by getting clear on what you believe. Not what you've borrowed, not what you've memorized. What you know through experience, reflection, and action. You study it, you refine it, and then you speak it and not with noise, but with clarity. Then you practice dropping the weak words. Cut the I think, the just, the maybe, the sort of. These words dilute your power. Speak as if your words matter, because they do. And finally, train your tone. Slow down. Speak with strength. Let your words land. Let your silence speak. Don't chase approval. Don't ask the room to validate you. Bring your own conviction and let the room adjust. Because when you speak with certainty, you don't just sound different, you feel different. And so does everyone around you. That's the language of the elite. And that's what you're learning to master. Chapter 5. Speak less. Influence more. The world is loud. Too loud. Everyone is talking. Everyone has something to say, but few are actually being heard. The 1% know something, the rest do not. Real influence isn't about saying more. It's about saying less. Speaking is not a performance. It's a precision tool. The elite don't waste words. They don't try to win conversations with volume. They win with clarity, with silence, with timing, and above all, with restraint. They speak less, but every word they say carries more meaning. Influence, after all, is not about being the center of attention. It's about becoming the center of gravity. When you're the one in the room who's not rushing to speak, not jumping into every topic, not over-explaining, people start to lean toward you. They begin to pay closer attention. Not because you're louder, but because you've made them curious. You've created space. And in that space, influence grows. The mistake most people make is thinking that talking more makes them sound smarter. So they fill the silence with fluff. They explain, re-explain, and justify. They speak to be liked. But the elite don't need to be liked. They need to be effective. They speak to move things forward, to make things happen, to leave an impression. That means they speak when it matters, not when it's comfortable. This is the principle of intentional speech. And it's the saying, I didn't see here. And it's the reason why the most powerful people in the world often say the least in meetings, yet get the most attention when they speak. Because when they talk, it's clear they've been thinking, listening, calculating. They're not impulsive, they're selective. And that selectiveness is what gives their voice power. The fewer words you use, the more each one matters. So, how do you develop this? You start by listening more, not just to respond, but to understand. The elite are incredible listeners. While others speak, they study, not just the words, but the body language, the tone, the patterns. They gather data. They learn how the room breathes. Then, when they speak directly into the gaps. That's what makes their words land. They don't just speak, they respond with precision. Then comes conciseness. The elite remove excess. They don't say, I was just thinking that maybe, when they could say, I believe. They don't say, let me give you a few examples. When they could say, here's what matters. They don't pad their words with fluff. They sharpen their language until it cuts cleanly. And people respect that. There's power in brevity. There's strength in stillness. And when you combine both, influence becomes inevitable. Let's talk about timing. The 1% know when to speak, not just what to say, but when to say it. They wait for the right moment, the right shift in energy, the right silence, and then they deliver. It's like a sniper taking a single shot, clean, quiet, and effective. This level of timing takes patience, discipline, awareness, but it also takes confidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't need to dominate the room to feel valuable. The elite don't rush to fill silence, but they own it. They also understand one key truth. If you speak too much, people stop listening. But if you speak just enough, they start remembering. It's not the loudest voice that gets remembered. It's the most precise one. In practical terms, this means mastering the art of saying exactly what you mean. No more, no less. That's not easy. It takes practice. It means thinking before speaking. It means editing your thoughts in real time. It means valuing silence as a tool, not a threat. And over time, something powerful happens. You start to become the person everyone looks to for clarity. You start to become the one whose words carry weight, because you're not flooding the room with noise. You're filling it with presence, with direction, with authority. Even in personal relationships, this shift matters. Speaking less doesn't mean being distant. It means being deliberate. Your partner, your family, your team, they begin to listen more carefully because they know when you speak, it's intentional. You're not just reacting, you're leading, and that's the goal. Lie to become someone whose voice leads, not just fills space. But here's the warning. This only works if your silence comes from strength, not fear. If you speak less because you're scared, people feel it. But if you speak less because you know, because you've thought deeply, because you've trained yourself, then people trust it. Because people don't just hear your words, they feel where those words come from. And when your words come from depth, they don't need decoration. They don't need volume. They don't need a spotlight. They just need space. So from now on, speak less. Speak after you've listened. Speak when the room is ready. Speak with intention, not impulse. And when you do, watch how your influence multiplies. Not because you shouted, but because you said what needed to be said, and nothing more. Chapter 6. How to own the room without saying a word. There's a kind of power that speaks before you do, a presence that enters the room with you, and sometimes even before you. The 1% have mastered this. They know how to own the room without saying a single word. No noise, no flash, no theatrics, just a silent, magnetic force that changes the energy around them the moment they arrive. This is not charisma in the traditional sense. This isn't about being extroverted or entertaining. This is about command, quiet, controlled, rooted. It's what happens when a person shows up so fully, so confidently, and so intentionally that the room adjusts to them, not the other way around. Let's break it down. Owning the room starts long before you walk into it. It begins with mindset. The elite don't enter a room looking to prove anything. They arrive knowing who they are. And that knowing creates gravity. Because when you don't need approval, you radiate authority. This mindset creates the foundation for everything else. It shifts your posture, your energy, your expression. It creates a kind of internal alignment that speaks for you before you speak. The body is next. Your posture is your first language. When you stand tall, shoulders back, chin level, you tell the room that you are grounded. You're not here to shrink or dominate. You're here to be. And that's enough. No need for fake power poses, no need to perform confidence. Real presence doesn't try, it just is. Then there's your pace. Those who own the room never move in a rush. Their steps are measured. Their gestures are intentional. They don't fidget. They don't scan the room nervously. They don't shrink into corners. They take their time because they've trained their nervous system not to react, but to lead. And leading doesn't require noise. It requires calm. Calm is one of the rarest energies in a chaotic world. And the elite wear calm like a crown. They stay steady when others jitter. They breathe deeply when others gasp. They move with rhythm, not with rush. And that stillness, that calm, becomes contagious. Now consider eye contact. The elite don't dart their eyes around the room. They don't avoid connection. They lock in, not to intimidate, but to see. When they look at someone, they're present, focused, and that focus is rare. Most people look past others. The elite look into them. And when you're the one who looks with purpose, people feel it. They feel your attention, your presence, your clarity, and they remember it. This is how you build invisible authority, not through speeches, but through stillness, not through noise, but through ownership of self. And part of owning the room is not needing to control it. The elite don't chase the spotlight. They attract it. They don't interrupt. They observe. They don't push. They wait. Because they know that energy doesn't lie. The one who's most in control of their energy controls the room. This is why you'll often see the most powerful person in the room saying the least. They don't need to impress. They've already impacted. Their stillness, their posture, their expression. It's all saying what words never could. And here's something else. Intentional presence. When the elite enter a room, they're not distracted. They're not lost in their phone or mentally rehearsing a script. They are here, fully. They see the room. They feel the energy. They notice who's engaged, who's performing, who's insecure. And because they're grounded, they adjust without losing themselves. Presence is adaptability without compromise. You don't need to be the loudest or most entertaining person in the room. You need to be the most centered, because people don't follow noise. They follow certainty, and certainty begins in silence. Now let's talk about dress. The elite dress with intention, not for attention, not to show off, but to reflect how they see themselves. Their appearance is clean, fitted, precise, because it signals respect, not just for others, but for themselves. And that respect is felt before anything is said. You don't need designer labels. You need alignment. Your appearance should match your energy. It should show that you care, not for vanity, but for value, that you've taken responsibility for how you show up. And that signal, subtle as it may be, gets noticed. And lastly, energetic stillness. This is the deepest layer. It's the feeling people get when you're in the room, even if you're not speaking. It's built through self-trust, through inner work, through emotional discipline. When you've done the work to calm your mind, heal your emotions, and clarify your purpose, you walk differently, you breathe differently, you exist differently, and that difference becomes your signature. You won't need to raise your hand to be seen. You won't need to fight for space to be heard. Your energy will carry the message, I belong here, because you've built it, you've earned it, and you've learned to trust it. So here's the truth. To own the room, you don't need permission. You don't need applause. You don't need to dominate. You need to be still, centered, clear, calm. Because when the elite walk into the room feels them. Before they speak, the room adjusts. And when they do speak, silence listens. Chapter 7. Commanding respect with your voice. There's a difference between being heard and being respected. Anyone can speak, but only a few command respect the moment they open their mouth. The 1% don't just speak to inform, they speak to lead. And when they do, their voice carries something more than sound. It carries authority. This authority isn't built on volume. It's not about being loud. It's not about barking orders or overpowering others. It's about a deep, grounded tone, a controlled pace, and a clarity that makes people stop and listen. Respect begins with how you carry yourself, but it's cemented by how you speak. Think about the last time someone spoke and instantly got your attention. It wasn't because they were shouting, it was because their voice didn't need to shout. It was steady, calm, rooted, and every word felt chosen. There was no fluff, no over-explaining, just precision. That's what makes people lean in. Let's start with tone. Your tone is the emotional layer of your words. It reveals what's underneath. A weak tone begs. A strong tone leads. When your tone is consistent and calm, it shows control. When it's reactive, scattered, or overly enthusiastic, it weakens your message. Even if your words are right, the elite practice tonal awareness. They speak from their core, not their nerves. Their voice isn't high and shaky. It's low, centered, balanced. Even in excitement, they maintain structure. Even in disagreement, they keep their voice firm, not frantic. That discipline earns respect. Now consider pace. Speaking too fast signals anxiety. It tells people you don't believe they'll stay long enough to hear you out. But when you slow your pace, just enough to breathe, just enough to let your words land, you communicate confidence. You're telling the listener, I have something worth hearing, and I'll say it at my pace. People follow that energy. They recognize it as strength. Next, clarity. The elite don't wrap their message in softeners. They don't hide their meaning under layers of kind of, sort of, or I was just thinking. They say what they mean, clearly, cleanly. without apology. That clarity demands respect. Because people crave leadership, not ego, not control, but direction. When your voice offers direction, when your words are focused, honest, and firm, others begin to lean on it. They trust it, and that trust becomes influence. But influence requires restraint. The elite know when to stop talking. They don't chase validation with extra words. They don't overprove their point. They know that silence, when used well, is as powerful as speech. When you stop talking at the right moment, your words echo. It's also in how you hold space when others challenge you. The person who can maintain composure, who can listen without getting defensive, who can respond without raising their voice, always earns more respect than the one who reacts emotionally. Respect is a mirror. The more you give it to yourself through discipline, self-awareness, and strength, the more others reflect it back to you. And that begins with inner mastery. When you respect your own voice, you train others to do the same. So here's what commanding respect with your voice looks like in real time. You speak when it matters. You say exactly what you mean. You deliver your message with calm and clarity. You don't rush. You don't ramble. You trust your silence as much as your sound. You're not performing. You're not chasing approval. You're speaking from center, from alignment, from truth. And because of that, your voice feels rare, grounded, valuable. In meetings, you become the person whose input carries weight. In conflict, you become the person others defer to. In leadership, you become the voice people remember. Because respect isn't requested, it's earned, word by word, choice by choice. Now let's talk about tone in different settings. In negotiation, the elite speak slowly. They keep their voice measured, never rushed. They listen fully before speaking. And when they do speak, they say what needs to be said. No more. In coaching or mentoring, their voice is warm but structured, encouraging but not coddling. They speak with conviction because they want you to grow, not just feel better. In crisis, their voice becomes the anchor. When others panic, they stay calm. Their words bring order. Their tone brings direction. And in that moment, people follow them. Not because they have all the answers, but because they sound like someone who will find them. That's what commanding respect looks like. It's not about volume. It's not about dominance. It's about alignment, discipline, and control. And here's what happens over time. The more you speak with this kind of authority, the more people listen. The more they listen, the more seriously they take you. The more seriously they take you, the more your voice shapes outcomes. That's how the 1% lead. Not just by being right, but by sounding right. By speaking from truth, with power, purpose, and presence. And when you do the same, you don't just command attention, you command respect. Chapter 8. Eliminating weak language from your vocabulary. Your words reveal everything, not just your ideas, but your beliefs, your confidence, your self-respect. And for the 1%, language is not casual. It's intentional. It's curated. It's sharp. They understand this. Weak words create weak impressions. Every time you soften a sentence unnecessarily, every time you hedge your belief with fillers or self-doubt, you reduce the power of your voice. And over time, this becomes a habit, one that slowly erodes how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. This chapter is about breaking that habit. Because if you want to speak like the elite, you have to eliminate weak language from your vocabulary. Let's begin with the most common offenders. I guess, maybe, sort of, kind of, probably. Just, these words sound harmless. They even feel polite. But when you use them constantly, they water down your authority. You don't sound confident. You sound unsure. You don't sound like a leader. You sound like you're hoping to be taken seriously. And here's the thing. No one will believe you if you don't sound like you believe yourself. Now, this doesn't mean you need to become cold or robotic. You can be human and warm without weakening your language. There's a way to speak with humility and still maintain strength. The elite do it every day. They've mastered the balance between confidence and connection. So how do you replace weak language with powerful speech? You start with awareness. The next time you speak, listen to yourself. Pay attention to the words you lean on when you're unsure. Notice how often you preface your thoughts with a disclaimer. You'll begin to hear the hesitation you didn't realize was there. And once you see it, you can start removing it. Let's go deeper. I think becomes I believe. I guess becomes I trust. Maybe we could becomes, here's what I suggest, sort of becomes nothing. Remove it. Just wanted to becomes I wanted to. Hopefully becomes I intend to. These aren't cosmetic changes. They're shifts in ownership. Weak words are a way of distancing yourself from responsibility. But strong words claim it. They stand behind your ideas. They plant your feet, and that's what people respect. Now let's address one of the biggest traps, over-apologizing. Most people use the word sorry far too often. Sorry for the delay. Sorry for interrupting. Sorry. But I was just thinking. This habit chips away at your presence. The elite apologize when it's necessary, not by default. They don't start every sentence by shrinking. They start with clarity. With respect, yes, but not with guilt. If you're late, don't say, "Sorry, I'm late." Say, "Thank you for waiting." If you need to speak up, don't say, "Sorry to interrupt." Say, "I'd like to add something." It's not about being rude. It's about speaking from ownership, not obligation. Let's talk about filler words now. Like, basically, literally. These words sneak into casual speech all the time. But when they dominate your vocabulary, they weaken your message. They make you sound unfocused, undisciplined, nervous. The elite are deliberate. They speak with space between their thoughts. They're not afraid of pausing instead of filling every gap with sound. And because of that, their words carry more weight. You don't need to sound perfect, but you do need to sound intentional. Intentional speech tells people that you care about how you're being received. It tells them that you've thought through your message, that you value your voice. And by extension, you value their time. Now let's talk about emotional qualifiers. I feel like I kind of hate it when I sort of love the idea. These phrases seem soft, but they're actually slippery. They avoid direct commitment. The elite don't hide behind feelings when delivering a message. They speak plainly, not harshly, but clearly. I feel like we're behind on the project becomes we're behind. Let's address it. I sort of love this direction becomes this direction works. Let's go further. And here's what happens when you begin to clean your language. People start listening differently. They lean in. They take your words more seriously. They trust your leadership more instinctively. You don't need to repeat yourself because your first words land. And slowly, your own self-image starts to change too. Because when you speak like a leader, you become one. When you remove weak language, your inner voice sharpens. And when your inner voice sharpens, your external world shifts. That's the compounding effect of intentional speech. Let's be clear, this isn't about sounding fake. You're not trying to become someone else. You're uncovering the strongest version of who you already are. You're removing the clutter that's been hiding your authority. And what's left behind is clean, focused power. This chapter is your invitation to speak like your words matter, because they do. So here's what to remember. Stop hedging. Stop apologizing when it's not needed. Stop diluting your thoughts with fillers and fluff. Own your message. Own your tone. And speak like someone who's building influence, not avoiding judgment. Because the elite don't hope they're being understood. They ensure it. Word by word, line by line, moment by moment. Chapter 9. How the elite use storytelling to influence minds, facts, and form. Stories transform. That's the unshakable truth the elite have mastered. They understand that logic may win debates, but stories win people. And when your goal is influence, when your mission is to shift perspectives, move hearts, and inspire action, storytelling is your most powerful tool. The 1% don't just tell stories. They strategically deploy them. Each story they share is chosen carefully, delivered intentionally, and crafted to do more than entertain. It's designed to stick, to shape thought, to plant seeds that grow long after the conversation ends. Let's begin with this principle. People don't remember data. They remember feelings. They remember the moment your story mirrored their struggle, the moment your voice carried emotion that they couldn't name but could feel. And in that shared emotion, a bridge forms. That's how trust begins. The elite understand that stories bypass the intellect and go straight to the nervous system. They don't just hear you, they experience you. And once someone feels your message, they don't forget it. But here's what makes their stories powerful. They are simple, specific, and emotionally anchored. The elite don't ramble. They don't drown their story in unnecessary detail. They strip it down to the essence, the moment of change, the insight, the struggle, the breakthrough. They know how to zoom in on a single moment and make it feel alive. They don't generalize. They dramatize with clarity. They don't say, I had a tough year. They say, I remember sitting on the kitchen floor, lights off, bank account empty, asking myself if I had what it takes. That's the difference. Specificity builds credibility, emotion builds connection, and simplicity makes it memorable. Let's go deeper. The elite use 3 types of stories to influence minds. 1. The relatable struggle. They share a past version of themselves, vulnerable, flawed, uncertain. They don't pretend to be perfect. In fact, they reveal imperfection strategically, because when people see where you came from, they trust where you are now. They feel hope. If you made it, maybe they can too. 2. The turning point. They tell about the moment everything shifted, the decision they made, the conversation that changed their thinking, the failure that taught them power. These moments reveal how they became who they are. And it gives the listener a blueprint, a way forward, a path to follow. 3. The vision story. They paint a picture of what's possible. They don't just talk about the past. They speak the future into life. They make people see it, feel it, want it. And in that vision, they enroll others in belief. This is leadership through imagination. But here's the real mastery. The elite don't make the story about themselves. They start with themselves, but they end with you. They tell the story so that you find yourself in it. They use their journey as a mirror, so you can see your own strength reflected back. That's how they inspire without preaching. That's how they lead without pushing. Now let's talk delivery. The elite don't rush their stories. They pace them. They know where to pause, where to drop their tone, where to build emotion, where to look someone in the eye. They let the story breathe because they trust the power of it. They don't oversell. They let the listener lean in, and they're not afraid of silence after the punchline, because in that silence, the message sinks. Also, they don't always wrap stories up with a neat moral. Sometimes they let the story do the work. They leave space for the listener to draw their own conclusion, and that conclusion becomes even stronger because it wasn't forced. Another secret? Authenticity. The elite don't fake stories. They don't exaggerate for effect. They tell the truth, and they tell it well, because people can feel when a story is real. They don't need drama. They need meaning. And meaning comes from lived experience, told with care. This is why the elite practice storytelling like a craft. They refine it. They rehearse it. They shape it until it's lean, powerful, and clean. Because they know one great story, well told, can change everything. In business, stories sell. In leadership, stories inspire. In relationships, stories build trust. In teaching, Chinmao, and stories anchor the lesson. And influence, stories open the heart. Now let's bring it back to you. You don't need to be a performer. You don't need to be dramatic. You just need to find your moments, the real ones. The moments when something changed, when you failed and got up, when you saw something differently, when you helped someone or got helped, when something inside you clicked. And then tell that story. Don't rush it. Don't hide in generalities. Make it real. Make it raw. Make it simple, and watch how people start listening differently. Because when you speak through story, you speak through emotion. You bypass logic. You create trust. You create movement. And that's what influence really is, movement. So if you want to speak like the 1%, don't just share facts. Share yourself, because your voice becomes unforgettable when your story becomes undeniable. Chapter 10. Embodying authority without sounding arrogant. Authority is not about being better than others. It's about being deeply rooted in who you are. And the elite know how to carry authority, not with arrogance, not with ego, but with a calm certainty that makes people listen, trust, and follow. They speak with a kind of weight, a presence that doesn't push, yet never apologizes for existing. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's undeniable. You've felt it before. Someone walks in, speaks a few words, and the room changes. They didn't demand respect, they didn't try to prove anything, but they owned themselves, and that ownership became influence. This is what authority sounds like when it's real. Let's make one thing clear from the start. Arrogance speaks to impress. Authority speaks to lead. Arrogance is insecure. It wants recognition. It's always trying to prove value, but true authority is different. It knows its value, with or without the applause. So how do the 1% walk this fine line? How do they express strength, power, and leadership without sounding like they're full of themselves? It starts with intention. The elite don't speak to be admired. They speak to be effective. Their voice serves a purpose. Their words are in service of clarity, direction, vision. That's why people don't resist their authority. They welcome it because it feels anchored. It feels stable. It feels earned. They don't speak over people. They speak to them. Big difference. Next comes posture. Not physical posture, but verbal posture. People with authority don't over-explain. They don't justify every decision. They don't ask for agreement before they speak. They say what needs to be said, with care, with clarity, and with confidence. And when they don't know something, they admit it without losing ground. That's real power. I don't have the answer yet. Let's find it. No drama. No defense, no pretending, because authority doesn't fear not knowing. Only arrogance does. Let's talk tone. The elite speak with a steady tone. It's calm, direct, and firm, but never cold. It holds its ground. It doesn't waver. It doesn't beg for validation, but it also doesn't attack. Arrogance is sharp. It cuts. It provokes. Authority is solid. It lands. It grounds. People feel safe around someone who owns their words, because that energy doesn't feel like competition. It feels like leadership. Another key difference, the elite elevate others while holding their own power. They don't need to diminish anyone to prove their value. They're secure enough to listen fully, to affirm others, to say, "You're right," without losing status. That humility isn't weakness, it's strength. It shows they're not building their worth on comparison, because real authority is never threatened. Let's break down where arrogance shows up and how the elite avoid it. 1. Over-talking, arrogant speakers dominate airtime. They talk too long, too loud, too often. The elite, they speak when necessary, then stop. They let their silence do the rest. 2. Name-dropping and self-hype. Arrogant voices constantly advertise accomplishments. The elite demonstrate value. They don't advertise it. Their results speak. Their clarity speaks. Their energy speaks. 3. Dismissiveness. Arrogance rolls its eyes. It interrupts. It corrects. Authority listens. Even when it disagrees, it holds respect. That's why people trust it. It doesn't feel like a threat. 4. Defensiveness. Arrogance can't take feedback. It flinches. It attacks. Authority receives feedback. It knows how to separate criticism from identity because it doesn't confuse disagreement with disrespect. Here's what the elite understand that most people don't. Authority is felt, not forced. You don't have to convince anyone. You simply have to embody what you're saying. When your voice aligns with your values, your tone aligns with your truth, and your intention aligns with your impact, people feel it. They might not say it out loud, but inside they think, something about this person feels real, feels grounded, feels strong. That's the mark of true authority. So how do you build it? You start with internal work. You clarify what you stand for. You train your mind to remain steady under pressure. You remove the need to perform. You replace it with the desire to serve. You speak to elevate, not dominate. You lead with presence, not performance. You don't pretend to be perfect. You show you're prepared. You don't chase attention. You hold attention. You don't flex. You flow with strength, certainty, and quiet command. The 1% don't walk into the room shouting for attention. They walk in, and people give it freely, because the strongest voices are often the most measured, the most composed, the most real. When you master this balance, you won't need to say, "I'm the leader." Your presence will say it for you. Chapter 11. Mastering the Art of Listening to Win. Influence. The most powerful people in the room aren't always the ones doing the talking. Sometimes, it's the ones who know how to listen, fully, actively, and with purpose, who lead everything without saying much at all. The 1% understand this deeply. Listening is influence. Real listening is not passive. It's not about sitting silently while someone else speaks. It's active, it's intentional, it's strategic, and when done right, it gives you something far more powerful than a loud voice. It gives you leverage. Let's begin with the mindset. Most people listen to reply. They listen just enough to form a response. They're not hearing to understand. They're hearing to interrupt, to defend, to inject their opinion. But the elite? They listen to read. They listen to gather, to decode, to learn. They treat every conversation as a field of data, human data. And by listening carefully, they gain more insight than any question could reveal. This is why people feel seen around them. It's not because the elite flatter others. It's because they pay attention so well, others feel valued. That's influence. Now let's break down what elite listening looks like in action. First, they listen with their eyes. They make eye contact. They don't dart around the room or glance at their phones. They are fully present. Their gaze says, "You have my attention." And that kind of focus is rare in today's distracted world. Second, they listen with stillness. No constant nodding, no filler sounds, no anxious energy. They're calm, still, absorbing. This stillness creates space, and that space makes the speaker go deeper. People open up in the presence of real listeners. Third, they listen without trying to win. They don't listen just to correct or counter. They're not waiting to pounce. They're not preparing a comeback while you're still speaking. They're fully there. And when they do respond, their words land, because their reply is rooted in something rare: complete attention. Let's talk about the emotional layer. When someone truly listens to you, you feel safe. You let your guard down. You say more. You reveal more. And that's where the elite gain their influence. Not by dominating conversations, but by allowing others to breathe in the space they create. You want people to follow you? Make them feel understood. Make them feel like their words don't bounce off you, but actually reach you. Because when someone feels heard, they're more open to what you say next. That's the influence cycle. Listen first, lead second. And the elite understand the strategic edge of silence. They use silence not just to pause, but to pull. Sometimes they ask a powerful question, then wait. They don't fill the silence. They let it stretch. Why? Because people say the most important things after the comfortable moment has passed. The first few seconds are surface talk, but after the pause, the truth shows up. And that's what the elite are waiting for. Listening is how they locate the tension, the need, the fear, the opportunity. They don't guess. They listen. Then, and only then, they speak with precision. Now let's go even deeper. The elite don't just listen to what's said. They listen for what's missing. They hear the words that weren't spoken, the hesitation, the shift in tone, the pattern of avoidance. And that tells them more than any direct statement could. This is emotional intelligence in action. They read the gaps. They hear the silence inside the speech. And because of that, they respond with a depth that others can't match. Here's another truth. Listening sharpens your voice. When you've heard deeply, when you've absorbed the context, the energy, the emotion, your response becomes tailored. It's not generic. It's specific. It's relevant, and that relevance is what makes your words cut through. This is how the elite avoid wasted language. They speak to where the person really is, not just what they said. They reply not to win, but to move. And in that movement, they earn trust. Let's now talk about power dynamics. When most people enter a conversation, they try to establish dominance by speaking first. But the elite often do the opposite. They listen first and speak last. Why? Because the one who listens fully can frame the narrative when it matters most. They absorb all perspectives. Then they offer a single response that ties everything together. And in doing so, they quietly take control. This isn't manipulation. It's leadership. It's emotional maturity. It's wisdom. You don't have to overpower to lead. You have to understand. And understanding begins with listening. So here's how to practice. When in conversation, pause longer before replying. Listen all the way through. Don't plan your answer while they're still talking. Don't fix their feelings. Don't rush to rescue. Let them finish. Then ask, is there more? You'll be surprised how much more there always is. And when you speak, reflect. Don't redirect. Mirror what you heard before making your point. Make them feel seen. Then they'll see you. Because in the end, influence isn't about who talks the most. It's about who makes people feel heard, understood, and respected. The elite know that, and they use it every single day. They don't just lead with words. They lead with ears, with presence, with patience. And that's why people follow them, not out of fear, but out of trust. Chapter 12. Speaking to inspire. Action, not just agreement. The goal isn't to be agreed with. The goal is to move people. You weren't born to speak for applause. You were born to speak with impact. And that's the difference between the average communicator and the elite. Most people speak to be liked. The 1% speak to change something, to shift a belief, to create momentum, to inspire action. Agreement is comfortable. Action is uncomfortable. And that's why so few ever learn to speak in a way that actually drives it. It's easy to say things people nod along with. It's harder to say things that make them get up and do something. But the elite, they speak for change. They use their voice as a lever, not to entertain, but to awaken. Let's break this down. When you're speaking to inspire action, you're not just giving information. You're giving emotion with direction. You're not just sharing thoughts. You're activating belief. You're not just expressing. You're leading. And leadership requires courage, because action comes after tension. You have to speak in a way that gently shakes the listener out of their comfort zone, not with force, not with guilt, but with clarity. The elite don't try to please every ear in the room. They speak what needs to be said, and they say it with love, strength, and vision. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They speak softly, waiting for universal approval. But if you're constantly adjusting your message to avoid resistance, you'll never inspire movement. You'll only inspire more stillness. Action comes when someone feels the truth in your voice, even if it's uncomfortable. So, how do the elite do it? They speak with purpose. Every story they tell, every word they choose, every pause they hold, it all aims toward one thing: transformation. They ask themselves, what do I want this person to think differently about after I speak? What do I want them to feel called to do? Then they build everything around that outcome. They don't drown people in facts. They don't ramble in circles. They simplify, they focus, and they direct. This is the architecture of influence. Let's say you're leading a team. You don't just say, let's do better. You say, here's where we are. Here's what's possible. And here's what we must do to get there. You make it real. You make it emotional. You make it inevitable. Because people don't act because of information alone. They act because something shifts inside them. The elite speak to that shift. They create emotional clarity. They paint the pain of staying stuck and the freedom of moving forward. They show what's being lost by delaying and what could be gained by deciding. They speak into urgency, but not panic. They speak into vision, but not fantasy. They speak into truth, not performance. And that truth is what unlocks movement. Let's go deeper. To inspire action, your voice must carry two energies: conviction and compassion. Conviction means you believe what you're saying. There's no hesitation in your tone, no wavering, no begging to be believed. You carry your message like it matters, because it does. And compassion means you speak with understanding. You're not judging. You're guiding. You're saying, I see you. I've been where you are. And here's the next step. That combination of strength and softness, that's what breaks resistance. You're not shouting at people. You're standing beside them, lighting the path. This is how the elite lead people without pushing them. And it's why their words create change, not just claps. They speak in a way that bypasses the surface and speaks to the soul. And souls don't move unless they feel seen, safe, and stirred. So here's what this looks like in real time. They speak with vivid imagery. Not just, you need to make a change, but you've been sitting in the same room for years, waiting for the door to open. But you haven't noticed. The key has been in your hand the entire time. They speak with rhythm, not monotone, but movement. They raise their voice just enough to energize. They lower it just enough to draw people in. They ask questions, not to quiz, but to awaken. They let the listener feel their own thoughts rising up. And then they give direction. They tell them where to go next, what to do, how to start. Because inspiration without direction is just noise. But inspiration with direction, that's transformation. And the elite never leave a message hanging in midair. They land it. They close with clarity. They speak the step. And in doing so, they give people something most communicators forget: permission to act, to change, to move, to begin again. So if you want to speak like the elite, don't just say what people want to hear. Say what will move them, even if it's hard, even if it makes them uncomfortable, even if they resist it at first. Because you're not speaking for likes. You're speaking for lives. You're not speaking to fit in. You're speaking to lead. And when your words carry vision, clarity, and heart, people follow, not just in agreement, but in action. Chapter 13: How to Handle Criticism and Still Lead the Room. Criticism is inevitable. If you speak with clarity, if you lead with strength, if you stand for anything, someone will push back. And the 1% know that criticism is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of impact. They don't avoid it. They don't shrink because of it. They rise above it, and they do it without losing control of their voice, their energy, or their influence. Because leadership is not about being untouched. It's about being unshaken. Let's start with the truth. The more powerful your voice becomes, the more visible your presence becomes, the more resistance you will meet. Not because you're wrong, but because you're seen. And the elite know how to remain anchored when criticism comes. They don't fall apart. They don't lash out. They lead through it. So how do they do it? It begins with emotional neutrality. They don't take everything personally, because they've separated their identity from people's opinions. They know who they are. So when someone attacks a sentence, a style, or a choice, they don't treat it as an attack on their soul. This is emotional maturity. And without it, your voice will always feel fragile. When you speak from insecurity, criticism hits like a hammer. But when you speak from purpose, criticism bounces off your center. Now let's go deeper. The elite listen carefully to criticism. Not to defend themselves, but to extract value. Because even in unfair criticism, there's a lesson. Sometimes it reveals how your message landed. Sometimes it exposes how you're being misunderstood. Sometimes it shows where your communication needs sharpening. They don't ignore criticism, they filter it. They ask, is this useful? Is there something I can adjust? Or is this just noise? And when it's noise, they let it go. Not with anger, but with clarity. Because your voice can't lead if it's constantly looking over its shoulder. Here's another truth. How you respond to criticism often says more than what you said in the first place. The elite understand this. They respond with calm. Not silence out of fear, but silence that says, I'm not here to prove, I'm here to serve. Or they respond with poise. Thank you. I'll consider that. Short, clean, done. And that's powerful. Because when the room watches how you handle heat, they decide if you're worth following. The leader isn't the one who speaks perfectly. It's the one who stays steady when others try to shake them. Let's talk about tone. When someone criticizes you publicly, you have a choice: react emotionally or respond strategically. If you respond with sarcasm or defensiveness, you lose control of the room. But if you respond with a composed tone, firm, not fragile, you gain respect. You show that your voice isn't just strong in peace, it's strong in pressure. That's what separates noise from leadership. The elite also know when not to respond. Not every attack deserves your attention. Not every opinion needs a reply. Some voices are speaking to provoke, not to contribute. And when you give them your energy, you drain your power. The strongest voices choose silence, not as retreat, but as strategy. Sometimes not answering is the answer. Let's now talk about criticism that cuts deeper. Criticism from someone you respect. This is where the 1% grow the most. They don't reject it. They invite it because they understand something simple. Your voice becomes sharper through friction. You want to lead better. Let people you trust challenge you. Let mentors refine you. Let discomfort develop you. The elite treat criticism like weight training. It might sting, but it builds strength. If you stay under it long enough, they don't confuse growth with rejection. They use feedback to upgrade their voice, not to hide it. Now here's a hidden power move. When you respond well to criticism, you influence not just your critic, but everyone else watching. People remember how you stood, how you stayed grounded, how you didn't flinch. And that example becomes its own kind of message, one louder than anything you said on stage. Because presence is tested under pressure. And when yours holds firm, you earn a deeper level of respect, even from your critics. So here's the framework the elite live by. 1. Expect criticism. It comes with the territory of impact. 2. Filter it. Not all feedback is equal. Some is noise. Some is gold. Know the difference. 3. Stay neutral. Don't fight back emotionally. Respond. Don't react. 4. Adapt without losing essence. If you learn something, grow from it, but don't shrink your message to make others comfortable. 5. Lead through it. Let your poise speak louder than the criticism itself. Because in the end, you weren't given a voice to hide it. You were given a voice to use it. And criticism, it's just the wind. You're still the mountain. The 1% don't back down from discomfort. They let it refine them. They let it reveal them. And then they speak again. Stronger, clearer, bolder. Because they know the world doesn't need perfect voices. It needs anchored ones. Chapter 14, Speaking with Style. The subtle art of verbal elegance. There's something about the way the elite speak that feels effortless, polished, but not rehearsed, confident, but not aggressive, clear, but never mechanical. They don't just speak, they flow. This is verbal elegance. It's the subtle style that elevates your voice from simply being heard to being remembered. And while many focus on content, the elite focus just as much on delivery, because it's not just what you say, it's how you say it that sets you apart. Let's begin with the core idea. Style amplifies substance. If your ideas are good, but your delivery is flat, they lose impact. But when you wrap your message in rhythm, tone, poise, and presence, your ideas shine. The elite understand this. They speak with intentional aesthetics. Every word, pause, and breath feels deliberate, not robotic, but refined. So what gives their voice that elevated feel? It starts with language precision. The elite choose their words with care. They don't waste vocabulary. They don't use 10 words when 5 will do. And when they do use expressive language, it's not for show. It's for impact. They use vivid verbs, clean transitions, balanced sentences. Their language paints pictures, not paragraphs of fluff. You hear them speak, and the ideas feel sharp, sculpted, complete. Next, rhythm. There's a cadence to how the elite speak. Not sing-songy, not monotonous, but musical, a wave-like motion that carries you along. They alternate between short sentences and long ones. They know when to pause, when to hold, when to pick up speed, and when to drop into silence. This rhythmic control makes their voice easy to follow and impossible to forget. Now consider tone blending. Most people have one tone, either too stiff, too emotional, too detached, or too casual. The elite shift tones seamlessly, from firm to warm, from curious to direct, from light to serious. They aren't stuck in one energy. They dance with tone, and that dynamic range makes their voice come alive. Let's talk phrasing. Great speakers don't always use perfect grammar. They use natural rhythm. They end on strong words. They don't overuse connectors. They breathe in their speech. They're not afraid to start sentences with "and," or to pause mid-thought and let the silence hold it. Because they're not trying to sound like a textbook. They're trying to sound real, but refined. Another layer, emotional layering. The elite don't flood their voice with emotion. They don't shout every feeling. They suggest emotion, They let the audience feel it by creating space, nuance, timing. When they speak about something painful, their voice slows. When they speak about something urgent, it tightens. When they speak about something hopeful, it lifts, ever so slightly. This emotional control adds flavor to their speech, subtle but powerful. And of course, humility in tone. Even when they speak with expertise, they don't sound like they're preaching. They share knowledge as an offering, not a command. They guide, not boast. They open space for others, even as they lead. And because of that, their style isn't intimidating. It's inviting. Here's what makes this important. Verbal elegance builds trust. It shows maturity. It signals control. It tells people, you're safe to listen here. There's no chaos in this message, only clarity. That safety earns attention, and sustained attention creates influence. So how do you develop this subtle elegance? You slow down your speech. You choose words like a craftsman, not a machine. You let silence shape your sentences. You read great communicators, not just for what they say, but for how they say it. You listen to your own voice, not to judge, but to refine. You practice not just what to say, but how to carry it, with calm, with control, with art. Because there's an art to speech, not performance. Not theatrics, but presence with polish. And when you combine presence with polish, your words glide. Your voice stands out, not by being loud, but by being gracefully powerful. The elite don't talk like everyone else, because they don't think like everyone else. They've trained their message. They've trained their tone. And they've turned their voice into a signature. When you master your verbal style, people won't just hear your words. They'll feel your presence. Not once, not twice, but every time you speak. Chapter 15. Your voice is your legacy. When the room is empty and the applause has faded, what's left behind is not how loud you were. It's how deeply you were felt, the tone you carried, the truth you shared, the moments of silence that made people reflect, the words that stayed long after you walked away. This is the final lesson the 1% understand. Your voice is not just a tool. It's your legacy. It's how people will remember you. It's what will echo in their decisions, their self-talk, their choices, because of what you once spoke with calm authority, with precision, and with presence. They may forget your face. They may forget your title, but they won't forget the way you made them feel. And often, that feeling comes through how you speak. Let's go beyond skills now. Let's talk about identity. Because the voice of the elite isn't just about techniques. It's about who you become through practice. It's about embodying the kind of human who commands space with humility, who leads with presence, not pressure, who speaks fewer words but lives a louder truth. You've learned how to pace, how to pause, how to choose words carefully, how to listen actively, how to eliminate weak language, how to speak from vision, how to balance conviction with compassion, how to influence without arrogance. But now the question becomes, what will your voice stand for? Will you use it to uplift or just impress? To guide or just perform? To echo what everyone else says or to say what only you can? Because your voice has weight. And when you learn to respect it, the world starts listening differently. You no longer speak just to fill silence. You speak to plant ideas, to break patterns, to speak life into spaces where people feel stuck, to challenge old thinking, not with ego, but with grace. And when you do this consistently, something bigger happens. People begin to associate you with clarity. They come to you not just for what you know, but for how you speak. They feel grounded around you. Not because you shout, but because you don't have to. This is where quiet power lives, not in volume, but in value. Your words carry authority because you've lived them. Your tone carries calm because you've earned it. Your silence carries weight because it comes from presence, not fear. This is what separates noise from legacy. Anyone can get attention. Few can leave a mark. But the ones who do, they've learned to master their message. They've learned that the most influential people in the world aren't always the most talkative. They're the most intentional. They speak less. They say more. And they walk away, leaving the room forever changed. So as you step out to use your voice, in meetings, in conversations, in hard decisions, in love, in leadership, in life. Ask yourself, what energy do I carry when I speak? What do I want people to feel when I enter and when I leave? Am I reacting or am I directing? Am I speaking from noise or am I hinshar or from depth? You've already begun the shift. You've already started to leave behind the habits that dilute. You've stepped into a way of speaking that aligns with your highest self. And now, it's not about being perfect. It's about being clear, being rooted, being real. This is your new standard. No more rushing through sentences. No more apologizing for ideas. No more talking in circles just to be liked. From here on, you speak from center, from vision, from intention. And because of that, you no longer need to chase influence. You become it. So let the world hear you, not just your sound, but your substance. Let them feel your silence, your pause, your tone, your truth. Because in that truth, you stop sounding like everyone else and start standing out as yourself. Your voice is your legacy. Use it wisely, use it bravely, and most of all, use it fully.